Paul George came to the Thunder in the last couple of days and asked to be traded to the Clippers. He wanted to play with Kawhi Leonard. 4 first-round picks, 4 unprotected future first-round picks, a protected future first-round pick, 2 pick swaps, and outstanding rookie point guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari for Paul George.
Just 5 years ago, the LA Clippers had finally made it. After years of anguish, then some pretty good Lob City teams, then a mini retool season, they were a relevant NBA franchise. In just one night, they put together a contender by signing Kawhi Leonard and trading everything for Paul George, 2 of the best wings in the league, and a superstar tandem that gave them a real chance at winning an NBA title. I remember the entire thing like it was yesterday. I went to sleep that night thinking that there were all these possibilities. Kawhi going to the Lakers, him going back to the Raptors, him going to the Clippers. But what actually happened was something that nobody foresaw. I woke up the next morning and the entire NBA had been flipped upside down. Paul George, who had just signed a massive extension with the Thunder the prior offseason, was suddenly on his way to LA to join forces with Kawhi. And as time goes by, I think this moment in NBA history is going to be lost a little bit because of how things have gone for the Clippers since, but it was truly one of the most shocking things that I've experienced in making videos about the NBA. And at the time, I'd say the trade had like an 80% approval rating or so. There were obvious risks, and most of those have come true, and the Clippers did give up a ton, but when you viewed the trade for what it was, as actually a trade for both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, it made more sense. Kawhi was not going to sign with the Clippers if they didn't add George, and he had other options. So yes, this was a trade for both of them. Now at the time, we all knew what the concerns were. We're kind of forgetting how many durability issues both of these players, Kawhi and PG, have had over the last couple of seasons. I mean, Kawhi is 1 full season removed from playing 9 games in San Antonio. And then Paul George just reconstructed both of his shoulders this offseason, just had surgery on both of them, and is a couple of years removed from an incredibly serious leg injury. And both of these guys are also approaching 30 years old. And now, with how things have gone and have continued to go for the Clippers, it's easy to look back on that and bash the Clippers for the move. But context here is really important. Paul George was coming off of the best season of his career in the 18-19 season. Where do you think Paul George finished in MVP voting that season? Just take a guess. He was 3rd. Meanwhile, Kawhi just won a title with the Raptors and looked like he was making a claim for the best player in the entire league when healthy. On paper, to add those 2 guys to a team with some solid role players, there was no price too high to make that happen. But of course, we all know how that has worked out. They were never healthy, they disappointed in the playoffs, they quit in the bubble, and everything in between. They changed the roster 100 times, even adding James Harden into the mix last offseason, and none of it has worked. They did make the conference finals that one time, but Kawhi wasn't even healthy for that. And now things have just gotten worse and worse, to the point where the Clippers might be in the single worst position of any team in recent NBA history. But I want to talk about last week. We were so close. We had the Caleb Williams free square, Brian Robinson to score a touchdown, and more on Anthony Richardson rushing yards, which is the one that let us down. But this week we have another chance to win with the sponsor of today's video, Prize Picks. And it's just that simple on Prize Picks. You pick your players, you pick more or less on each of these numbers, and if you win some cash. Now, if this is your first time on Prize Picks, there's 2 different things you can do. First, you get $50 instantly anytime you make a lineup of more than $5. And to make that happen, you click the link in the description, you use code SPORTY to get that $50 instantly with a $5 lineup. I'll be putting together some more lineups for you guys in the future, and click the link in the description for that instant $50 when you play a $5 lineup with my code SPORTY. Go have some fun this weekend on Prize Picks, and thank you again to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the Clippers. You might be thinking, this situation isn't that bad. Yes, they lost Paul George this offseason, but he wanted a long-term max contract, and all the injury issues made it not worth it to LA. Just read the statement that they put out when he left, the salary cap, the second apron, all that means it was an okay move. I hear what you're saying, but this is a complete disaster, and it's about to get even worse. Because Kawhi Leonard is already hurt again. He just had another knee procedure, and his status for the beginning of the season is already in doubt. And this is why they should have kept Paul George. You can talk about the contract and all that, but can you imagine what this team will look like in the many, many games that Kawhi is likely to miss this season? James Harden, if he's even healthy, leading the way with a bunch of role players out there. That worked about 5 years ago, but not so much anymore. Now, when PG was there, they made it work just fine, but now somehow they're relying on Kawhi even more. This news is also interesting in the context of the Team USA situation this offseason, where Leonard and his camp were reportedly upset that he was sent home from the team because he felt like he was healthy enough to contribute. And now here we are, the season hasn't even started yet, and he's already having a procedure on his knee. And if the Clippers get the normal version of Kawhi that we've seen the last couple of years, the guy that doesn't play nearly enough, this is going to get ugly fast. Because the Clippers do not have control over their own first-round pick this season or years into the future. The Oklahoma City Thunder, of course, have the right to swap picks with the Clippers, and if things keep going this way for LA, that could easily be a pretty high pick. A Harden plus some other guy's team in a Western Conference that is this loaded is probably a sub 45 win team, and maybe even worse than that. Can you imagine, after all the stuff that the Clippers have given up, then Paul George leaves this offseason, then they just give away a lottery pick to the Thunder? That's what I mean when I say this is one of the worst situations that we have seen in recent NBA history. A team that lost arguably its best player in free agency this offseason, that is now counting on two aging and injury-prone stars to try and get to 45 wins in a loaded conference, that doesn't have control over their first-round pick this year, next year, in 2027, 2028, or 2029. There is no path where this goes well for the Clippers, barring some kind of miracle healthy season. But you know what's crazy about all of this? Despite there not being a clear plan, despite how stupid it was to lose Paul George, despite the lack of assets and the injuries, I still completely understand why the Clippers made the moves they did back in 2019. Obviously, we now know that SGA is an MVP caliber guy, and the injuries and the playoff disappointments, but if you can take yourself back to 2019, before we knew any of those things, would you really not make the trade? In theory, if healthy, adding PG and Kawhi, who again were probably 2 of the 10 best players in the entire league that offseason, gave the Clippers a 3 to 5 year window of true contention. And if they didn't make those moves, where were they going? Yes, they had SGA, but remember, we don't know how good he's going to be yet back then. And if you don't add Paul George, if you don't add Kawhi, you're just a 40 to a 45 win team. And what exactly is the point of all that? Where are you going? The point of all of this is to win, to compete for a title, to bring a championship to the Clippers franchise. And of all the moves that they could have made back in 2019, what they did gave them the best chance to do just that. Was it risky to trust the health of Kawhi and PG and later Harden too? Of course. If they knew then what we know now, they would have just tried to sign Kawhi and some other free agent, and if that didn't work, they'd just develop SGA and a young core. But I feel the exact same way about the Clippers moves in 2019 that I do about another team that made big moves that offseason, the Nets. They added Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant that offseason, and it's easy to argue now that those were bad decisions, but I honestly don't think that they were. The Nets were the best team in the league in 2021, and if healthy, they'd have had as good of a chance as any team in the playoffs that year to win the title. But injuries got in the way. And isn't that exactly what you want? The dream scenario, to be in the best position in the league to win a title? Now that didn't work, and obviously they got stuff in exchange for KD, Kyrie, and Harden when they left, so it's not a perfect example, but the point still stands. Even in this worst case scenario outcome that the Clippers are currently living in, I still think adding PG and Kawhi back in 2019 is totally defensible. You could certainly argue that because of the age of those guys and the injury history, it was this massive risk that they never should have taken, but you could have said the exact same thing about the 2019 Toronto Raptors, who won the title because they traded for Kawhi a year earlier and he got through the season healthy. Now, they didn't give up nearly as much in the Kawhi trade as the Clippers did when they got PG, and they had good role players around Kawhi at the time. But again, the point is to win the title. Now, what isn't defensible in all this is losing PG for nothing this offseason because they didn't want to add an extra year to his contract. And that is the biggest reason, other than injuries, that they find themselves in the complete disaster season that they're in right now. Unless something unforeseen happens, the Clippers are looking at being one of the worst franchises in the league for the next 5 or so years, but I can honestly respect the gamble that got them there.